Hello, I'm Neil Bradley, Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our third and final State of American Business Policy Power Hour. We hope you've enjoyed this week's programming, and I got a real treat for you in this, our third and final installment of the series. As we've talked about all week, good public policy can provide the foundation for new business creation, business growth, job creation, and overall prosperity. At the same time, a misguided policy can destroy jobs, destroy businesses, and really hurt our ability to grow and prosper and support our families. Turns out that's true whether we're talking about policy on the federal level or policy in our states and local communities. Today, we're going to explore some of the impacts of policy at the state and local level. Here at the U.S. Chamber, we are privileged every day to work with this incredible network of state and local chambers, what we call the Federation of Chambers. These individuals, these men and women, every day are on the front lines trying to improve the economic environment in their communities, in their states, and for their members. Today, we're going to hear from them about the policy situations and how it varies from red states, blue states, and purple states. We're going to learn about some of the lawsuit and litigation challenges confronting businesses all across this country. But to set the stage for our discussion, we thought we would start with a small business perspective. What is it that state policy means for small businesses? Let's hear from them now.
Hi, I'm Tom Sullivan, the Vice President for Small Business Policy at the Chamber, and I have the best job here at the Chamber. I get to work with small businesses every day. This Policy Power Hour segment is going to focus on governmental barriers to entrepreneurial growth. State by state regulatory differences can make it tougher for small businesses to expand and grow. And we're joined today by two small business owners. We're going to share their experiences dealing with state regulatory roadblocks. Melissa Bercier, founder of Couch Clarity, just outside of Chicago, is with us today, as well as Russell Dunn, founder of Made in Texas, that's Made, M-A-I-D, in Texas, who's based just outside of Dallas. Melissa, let's start with you. Share with us, after you introduce your company to the viewers, but share with us a little bit your experience with state regulatory barriers that might have put a crimp in some of your plans to expand.
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, hi, Tom and Russ. Thank you so much for having me here today. So before I answer the question, yes, I am the owner of Couch Clarity, which I started in 2012. We are a group psychotherapy practice based out of the western suburbs of Chicago. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I also have my PhD in social work from Loyola University in Chicago. We have a team of 14 licensed therapists, and we also have 4 locations. We offer not only traditional on the couch therapy, but we also offer walk and talk therapy. So all of our locations are located on or near the Illinois Prairie Path here. So we have the ability to walk and talk during our therapy sessions. And my goal is to destigmatize mental health enrichment and create a more positive and healthy community for all. And I would love to do that nationally. So that brings me back to your question. We do have some roadblocks and barriers that prevent us from scaling as a company. And those have to do with practice mobility and license portability. And these involve the ability for us as social workers to easily work in other states if we so choose. So licensing for social workers is very specific to each state, which presents one of the major challenges for our growth. For therapists and specifically social workers, Each state has their own laws that govern social work licensing, and that they define the activities that social workers are allowed to perform. So, for example, in Illinois, we're regulated by the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. And the social worker's scope of practice is dependent on their education, experience, and the competency demonstrated by taking a licensing exam. But the regulations in each state are not portable. So if a social worker would want to move to a different state and practice, or even if I, as the owner and supervisor, would want to clinically supervise people in other states, I would also have to be licensed in those states.
Well, thank you, Melissa. The lack of licensure portability certainly seems like it's a barrier for you to expand into a nationwide model. Now, Russell, you originally had a business in California, I believe, and then you moved to Texas. And it sounds like when we were talking before that your move to Texas was in part because of a more attractive business climate. So can you do a little bit of a before and after comparison of California and Texas and how they're approaching different regulations that affect your business after you get a chance to introduce yourself and your business?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for inviting me and giving me a chance to speak a little bit about this. We did start a house cleaning company in California actually in 2006. And it was a employee-based model at that point. We operated from 2006 to 2012 in that format. And in 2012, still in California, we converted to using independent contractors. And that was driven a lot by a lot of the regulations in California that are quite hindering the ability for companies to operate and grow. Particularly in California, that you are under constant scrutiny by agencies like the EDD, which is the unemployment agency in California, and they seem to have an intent on conducting constant audits on small businesses to make sure that they are compliant with labor laws. We always have been. But the ability to work with independent contractors gave us a lot of advantages, both on the cost and the operational side. So we made that change in 2012 and very successfully. So one of the things we did is we were part of an association which is still in California. It's an association of domestic referral agencies, and the sole purpose of that association is to assist companies operating under that method to be compliant with the laws, and that includes both the state laws such as the EDD, the Labor Board, and also the IRS. But it was almost like the state of California was constantly tightening the screws and making things more and more difficult. And we actually continue to operate the company in California. It's called Spotless Maid Referral Agency, and it's still there, but it is diminished in size since we have moved to Texas. We relocated here in 2017 in June for both personal and business reasons, and it's just a more open environment to operate in Texas. You have less scrutiny by the government. It's almost living in a freer world, so to speak.
And Russell, so thank you for explaining a little bit about the difference between the approach California has taken and the approach that Texas has taken. And just kind of curious, could you share a little bit, Russ, about why would an independent contractor work with you as to get referrals in business, as opposed to them marketing on their own for customers and hours and cleaning jobs?
Sure, and I can answer that because we answer it all the time in recruiting and getting additional contractors to work with us. The thing is, the independent contractor model gives them the flexibility and freedom to be their own business person. Most of them, by definition, because they are independent, they do have some of their own private customers that have nothing to do with us. What we're able to do is to assist them in filling their schedule with as much or as little work as they really want to do. So we don't dictate where they work, we don't dictate when they work, and we don't dictate how much they work, and we don't even dictate how they work. So we only deal with people who have experience and are professionals. And it's attractive to them because they can make as much or as little as they want to make or need to make, and do that in the hours that works in their lifestyle. So they can work around children and schools and spouses' schedules and all of that, and they're not worried about us telling them when they have to work or not. So it's a model that is it's the right model for some people. It's not the right model for everybody, though.
Well, thank you, Russ. And Melissa, I mean, when we've talked in the past, it strikes me that so much of how we approach our small business is based on experiences from your own personal background. And you were sharing that as a military spouse, you were frequently going in different parts of the country, and you found it very difficult to get reciprocity from one state to another. Do you feel as though that has evolved and perhaps sped up with the pandemic, or do we still have a long way to go where states realize here is a good mental health professional? We would be lucky if other states also allowed that person to practice in another state. So where are we right now in that continuum?
Right, and that's a good question. I know the Association of Social Work Boards is working on that initiative. They are looking for people to support that initiative in order to make those changes. Honestly, I don't know how far away we are from those changes. I think it's going to take a lot because each of the states have different regulations and policies, and even the titles for our job are different state by state. So I think one of the things that they're trying to do is get that reciprocity for bordering states. So that's a step in the right direction. So for example, I mean, this isn't happening now, but like if Illinois and Wisconsin had reciprocity where we could easily go into Wisconsin and practice. So I know there are some states that are working towards that. So it can be a very long process in order to be able to actually work when there's a job there waiting for you, but you have to get all of those things taken care of in order to make that happen in the state that you want to work in.
Well, thank you, Melissa. It sounds as though the license reciprocity has come pretty far, but it's obvious from your experience, we've still got a long way to go. So thank you for sharing with us how some of the challenges that lay ahead can be addressed by different state leadership. And Russ, thank you for joining us. And it sounds as though some states that are looking for entrepreneurs like you have some lessons to learn from how Texas is treating small businesses, because if it has attracted you and thousands of other entrepreneurs, I am sure that other governors in other states would like to have some of that flow, that job creation and community flow into their states as well. So Russ, thank you for that. And both of you, thank you so much for joining us for this segment.
Thank you so much.
You.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Melissa. It is now my honor and pleasure to introduce three great leaders in their respective states. Katie Boyd Britt is the president and CEO of the Business Council of Alabama. John Harmon is the founder, president, and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey. And Alan Zarenberg is the president and CEO of the California State Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedules. So I want to pick up on from what we just heard in this last panel. You know, we often talk about competition amongst businesses, how business competition is a good thing. It's part of a free enterprise. But there's also kind of competition when it comes to public policy. And knowing all three of you, I know you're fighting every day to get the most favorable policy for business creation and growth in your states. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Katie, let's start with you.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, we have had tremendous growth with regards to economic development in our state. I'd really say kind of over the last 30 years. With coming in and starting with Mercedes and then being able to build off of that, we have really seen the state coalesce around economic development incentives. You would see, I guess if you even roll back to kind of 2015, we had a really great package with economic development incentives, the Alabama Jobs Act and the Growing Alabama tax credits. And we've seen significant investment, not only those tax credits, which has been about $2.3 billion, but the return on investment, we've had about, like over $13 billion invested in our state as a result, and about 30,000 jobs. So what we're trying to do is set policy that sets the stage for continued growth throughout our state. And one thing that I think has been especially good to see as we look to reauthorize those moving forward is the emphasis placed on rural communities. Mm-hmm. So we continue to look about, in 2019, we had the Alabama Incentives Modernization Act, again, trying to create policy not only for our current workforce, but really thinking about what is the workforce going to be in the future and how can we look to bring tech jobs to Alabama. And so seeing that and seeing the emphasis placed on rural communities and knowing that what we are focusing on is trying to incentivize companies and businesses to create good paying solid jobs for Alabamians. And so I think that that's something that we are doing and doing well, and I'm really proud of and would love to talk more about. But something that I think is a challenge for us that we are tackling, but we have some ways to go, is broadband. And I think what we've seen in COVID, and it's really kind of crystallized the issues with that. When you look at our population, they say we have over 90% of our lands in Alabama are deemed rural, but we have about 41% of our population that lives in rural communities. And it's important that they have access to, high-speed internet. If we want to have 21st century workforce and 21st century jobs, and we have to have 21st century infrastructure. And so that's something that we're tackling here through a very ways, public-private partnerships and other ways. But that's something we still have to keep our foot on the gas on here in Alabama.
That's great. It's rewarding to hear about the areas where progress is being made. Alan, what's the situation look like in California? What are you seeing?
Oh, great. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be part of the panel here and to talk to everybody. I thought the small business discussion before us was a very good lead in, because, none of these things happen at a policy level unless somebody gives a politician an idea, gives a regulatory agency an idea. And I think it's up to us to be able to generate those ideas to help business, just like Katie was talking about things that she's doing to help businesses in Alabama. But we know it's so important that the public perceives that small business is crucial to our economy, and they're really great messengers to be able to do this. But they don't have the resources by themselves. We need to pull them together. And, politicians pay attention to who supports them, whether it be large companies or whether it be unions. And to be able to have somebody, there's always somebody in somebody's ear pushing an agenda. And it's so crucial that we have, and I appreciate so much that you're doing this, Neil, and Katie's talking about it, is we have the support that we need to stand up and deliver that agenda for businesses. And small business needs us, but we need them just as much to carry that message. But it takes the large businesses who are also impacted, and many of the laws that we have here in California are directed towards large businesses. They talked about independent contractors versus employees. This deals with the tech sector, but I think we saw a great example of how that impacts small business, even though that was never the intent. So I think it's up to us to be able to take that information and be that voice of small business. And I think in many respects, even for large business and for everybody, that small business voice can carry a lot of weight with the public. And a lot of times we have to engage the public and make sure they're the ones carrying the message.
Yeah, Alan, you're so right. Sometimes we forget about the power of stories, right? We love to dive into data and numbers and all that. Sometimes just hearing a small business owner say, it was too much. I couldn't operate my business, or you made me do all these things. That's what's really impactful. That truly is the power of chambers, to be able to pull together and tell those stories. John, let's go to New Jersey, and a lot of attention this year on Black-owned businesses, and in particular amongst COVID, the challenges that they face, and all of us hoping that 2021 is an era of opportunity. What's it look like on the ground there?
Well, again, thank you for allowing me to hang out with you guys today. I'm going to pick up where Alan left off. It's all about who's pushing the agenda and how do we strike an equitable and reciprocal balance here in New Jersey. New Jersey is largely a Democratic state. Both houses are run by Democrats, have a Democratic governor, and Blacks in general are very over-indexed in the party. So we're making some progress, but my hope is that we could have done it a lot quicker. As it relates to Blacks, we see the Murphy administration recently let out several millions of dollars of contracts for Blacks to manage funds, public funds, which is a great thing. He just rolled down a recent economic package. This several billions of dollars is going to be kind of bottom-up focused. They're supporting a bonding program that's going to help more Black businesses be a part of the public contracting sphere. And so we're encouraged by that. And moreover, there's some spillover from the Equality and Opportunity Initiative led by the U.S. Chamber with state chambers and business associations in New Jersey, which is going to be ultimately, I think, is going to be beneficial to all. But the challenge lies in the equitable participation in public contracting. New Jersey is largely a unionized state, and unions have a huge preference, and there's not much diversity in contracting as well as employment in public contracting for Blacks. So that's some work that we still have to kind of figure out. We have the highest poverty, highest unemployment. $5,900 is net worth for the 1.1 million Blacks versus 309,000 for whites in New Jersey. So we have to find a way to get the Black community in a better place so that we can improve the overall competitiveness for the state in general. So I'm encouraged as a chamber executive. You got to be optimistic and plow forward, but we have to find that equitable reciprocal balance here in our state.
Katie, this is something I know you've been working on. I hope you're going to jump in on it.
I wanted to just touch on what John was talking about and what we're doing here in Alabama. Our governor has gathered several different working groups, but the one that we have gotten to be a part of, the Business Council of Alabama, has gotten to work alongside the Legislative Black Caucus. And we're taking a look at exactly what John's saying and looking at, what can we do for Black-owned businesses to help create the proper foundation and help give the support that is needed to make sure that they're successful and thrive and grow. What we've found in working with our Department of Minority Affairs is just we really don't have a current database of that to kind of sort of know and get that information in the right hands. So we're working in lockstep those groups to kind of create that so that we can see what sectors where we have Black-owned businesses that are thriving, and maybe where there's some gaps and where we can help with workforce development and initiatives in that regard. Separately, we are working also in another subcommittee of that to just talk about equity issues and talk about access to capital and access to equity. And so we are really excited to have the opportunity to work with our Legislative Black Caucus and under the governor's direction to really roll up our sleeves and take a look at these things and not put a Band-Aid on them, but honestly dig down and figure out how do we create a foundation to move our entire state forward as a result. So
that's good.
It's been fun. It's been fun to be a part of. We certainly have a lot of work to do, but just the connectivity and working hand in glove, it's going to what John's saying. We're seeing that here in Alabama as well.
So Neil, I think I mentioned this, that, one of the ironies in California is that we've created these platforms that allow people to work anywhere. One of the ones we're on today, and whether it's this one or Zoom, where you can be virtual meetings, and the world is going to change. And we can lose our jobs to rural Alabama because if they have the right broadband, they're going to be able to compete with the talent. And I think for both New Jersey and Alabama and California, one of our agendas is to make sure that we retain that talent. And we're able to have the best higher education system in the world is what we need to do, and we need to create those opportunities for everybody. And this competition, whether it be Texas or New Jersey or Alabama, for talent pool that can work anywhere, it really needs to. That's one of the things that we look at and say, we need to be on our toes. We need to be aggressive. We need to how to keep those best paying jobs here in California. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that we have the best research universities in America. And we're going to continue to develop that technology. But I think, like I said, it's ironic that we create it, and that enables somebody to go to Texas or Alabama and be able to be part of a major technology company and complete your business somewhere else. So talent is really important, and being able to take advantage of that and being able to be attractive to that talent is what we all have to work on if we're going to be competitive in just among ourselves in the States and in this country, but throughout the world.
Yeah, Alan, that's a great point. We always used to think about the competition of who can get that big employer, who's going to get the factory or the new headquarters office, and I assume that's going to continue to remain. But now all the states and localities, they're going to compete for the talent because the headquarters may be somewhere else.
Absolutely,
they choose to live right there. Before we switch topics, I want to remind our audience, you can submit questions. We'll be taking questions at the end of this program. Just go to the question box, submit your question. We'll get to all of those. I want to take a slight detour because I want to go back to something that Alan talked about a little earlier in response to Russ, our small business owner. And he mentioned independent contractors and some of the challenges there. But Alan, there are a lot of other policies that we're talking about on a national level that you've been dealing with first, like data privacy and others. Tell us how those things are working. How are these policies being driven? What kind of considerations are being given to the impact on workers and businesses?
Well, those are both good examples, I think, to show where business stands up and companies are willing to stand up and be heard and put resources in. You make a difference. So let's take the independent contractor situation. And we've had some court cases, and then we had some legislation here that were really after the ride-sharing companies, Uber and Lyft, to make sure that they wanted their employees, they wanted their workers to be employees. And this comes back to what I said. The policymakers don't make these things up themselves. The unions push this. And they were after them because they'd like to organize the rideshare workers. Well, that was in question whether or not they were independent contractors or employees here. And we had, it's just as an aside, when businesses do something that are not good for their workers, it ends up in litigation here in California. And bad facts make bad law. And we have laws. I mean, and they affect everybody. So we had major companies that didn't treat their workers properly, and it trickles down to what we heard about Russell, about him not being able to hire independent contractors in California. And that's one of the consequences. But the ride sharing companies, Uber and Lyft and DoorDash, put $200 million into a campaign here, direct democracy, and went to the ballot. And they made sure that the public supported them, educated the public, and their workers no longer are going to be classified as employees. The people have spoken. On the other hand, privacy, which is coming, I think, everywhere, but we had a chance for our major companies, some of the wealthiest corporations in the world, to stand up and say, we're going to kill that legislation because it was legislation, it was an initiative, and they decided to say, privacy, we don't necessarily want to be seen as being against privacy, and didn't put any money into a campaign. And we easily could have defeated that at the ballot box, but they chose to say that is not something that we want to be recognized as being against privacy. And they decided not to put the money in. even though they could easily afforded it. And now we have the first privacy law in America that's a little bit modeled after GDPR in Europe. And privacy changes are coming, but the issue is, do you have a role in doing that? Which we had some negotiations in the ballot measure that just passed, so we were involved. But this is a question of whether or not you want to be part, as Katie said, she's at the table on certain things that are helping other people. Are you at the table, or are the policymakers dictating policy to you because somebody else is pushing that? And that would be the consumer privacy attorneys, and so you need to be part of that discussion. But I think the most important point here is you need to stand up for yourself. All businesses, whether they be using us here at the table, they need to be willing to go forward and put the resources in and make sure that their voice is heard.
John, that's a message I hear you deliver all the time. Talk about how we have to stand up and support business, or otherwise there are some pretty dire consequences, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so, Alan, we anticipate that show that you just had in California is coming to New Jersey soon, so we'll be ready for that. But one of the things that we're doing here in the state is helping some of our other chamber and business associations diversify their boards, putting more Blacks on their board to get a different perspective. And I appreciate what Katie said about their engagement with the caucus down there. It's about perceptions. There's still some widespread perceptions that Blacks are less than, can't meet the value proposition. And my job daily is to remind folks and push back on that perception that we have men and women that have the wherewithal to provide value. And I think that's the thing that we still have to get through here in New Jersey. The perception exists that Blacks don't have the wherewithal to add value. And so that's grossly wrong. And in order to improve the competitiveness, not only in New Jersey, but America, is that we need to have more diversity around the table. But men and women, once they get around the table, they must speak up and represent the interests of those that they're part of. And it will make for a better country and a better state.
And I'll tell you, just from the COVID, obviously, it's really highlighted for us in Alabama, not only the things that I discussed with John, but what Alan's saying about small business and really being the advocate for that. I mean, in Alabama, over 99% of our businesses are deemed small business by the SBA. I mean, it is truly the lifeblood of our state. And as the daughter of two small business owners, I know firsthand that what happens in DC and what happens in our capital here in Montgomery, Alabama, it affects your ability to do business, grow business, and to help your employees. And so I know, we believe the fruitfulness of the employer is passed down to the employee and to the community at large. And so opening our doors and making sure you're listening, and then you're not just listening, but you're taking that and you're moving it forward, and you're trying to create policy or less regulation, as it may be, to let these businesses flourish.
Well, we just have a couple minutes left, so maybe we'll do a quick lightning round, and we'll start with Alan and then go to John and let Katie have the final word. But the lightning round is really simple. 2020 was let's just say it was a rough year, and we're all hoping that 2021 is going to be a lot better. But part of making 2021 better, and frankly, even looking ahead to 2022, is getting the policy right, not just here in Washington, D.C., but in your state capitals. So you guys are in the midst of your legislative sessions. What is the most important message that you're delivering to policymakers in your state that you want our audience to know about? And Alan, we'll let you go first.
Well, I think for us, and certainly for everybody, is to be able to get our economy back up and running. And, government's good at certain things, but business is better at certain things. And we need to roll out these vaccines as quickly as possible that were developed in the private sector. We need to get everybody inoculated. And, there's a lot of talk about stimulus. I know in Washington, they're going to talk about infrastructure. There's a lot of needs out there for infrastructure. But in terms of job growth, job creation, if we can get our economies up and running, because the business community is heavily involved in promoting vaccinations and get everybody that herd immunity through the vaccines, we'll be able to open our businesses up. And that's the start. And that's the opportunity for everybody that we need to make sure that we take advantage of.
And I would agree with Alan in terms of the health part, but again, policy has to be equitable. We have to reduce regulation. Katie's 100% right. We're having more access now to capital. We have about 20 banks that just joined our chamber. So that's going to help. But at the end of the day, I hate to be so repetitive, equity and reciprocity. Blacks are supporting one party substantially over-indexed, not getting an equitable return on their investment. And I think that's the conversation that we must come to grips with, particularly with this new administration. So I'm looking forward to working with them.
And I would say, doubling down on what both of them said, I think vaccines will be something we're absolutely talking about. Unfortunately, our rollout numbers have not been where we wanted them to be. Obviously, what John is talking about, that is going to be a centerpiece of dialogue through everything that we do moving forward. And then I would say probably this session right out of the gate is liability, protection for business owners who are doing their very best to make sure that they are adhering to the ever-changing CDC and OSHA guidelines. And we have got a really great piece of legislation that we put together with regards to just making sure that people who are working to do the right thing and keep their employees safe and keep their customers safe and keep people working so they can provide for their family, that they don't have to worry about frivolous lawsuits. And so that'll be right out of the gate the thing that we are really pushing for, because we have a lot of people hanging on by a shoestring, and the last thing they need is to be served papers for something ridiculous like that.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Alan, John, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. As it happens, I'm about to turn it over to my colleague Harold Kim, who's actually going to explore more in depth some of those frivolous litigation issues that Katie was just talking about. So thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year, and good luck in your legislative sessions. We wish you all the best.
Thanks for having us, Neo. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome to our discussion about municipality litigation. Yes, municipality litigation. So what am I talking about? We're talking about cities, counties, localities, bringing contingency fee-driven lawsuits against those in the business community. Unfortunately, this has been a growing area of concern. And thankfully, we have with us today the Attorney General from the great state of Ohio, Dave Yost, to join us and talk to us a little bit about what's going on here. General Yost, Happy New Year. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. An important topic.
Well, as a defendant or as a business, being on a receiving end of a complaint where you have a city or a county bringing a lawsuit where you've basically deputized a private law firm to come after you for a number of theories of liability. We've certainly seen it in the opioid space, but we're seeing this grow as well. Being the chief law enforcement officer in a state, what is your take on this growing area of litigation?
Well, I'm deeply concerned about it for a number of reasons. Some of them are tactical. For example, it multiplies risk and instability in the business climate, which is something we don't want to have. Look, there are people that are going to do bad things and going to end up getting sued. Being sued by a pack is different than being sued by one person who's been wronged. And that leads us to kind of a second problem, which is the potential for duplicate damages. Take my state, for example. Most people have heard of Cleveland, Ohio. That's located in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, which has 52 other municipalities within its borders. And of course, Cuyahoga County itself is an administrative subdivision of the state of Ohio that I represent. So it's possible that someone living in Lakewood or Cleveland, Ohio, might be represented by a law firm from that city, also represented as a resident of Cuyahoga County by a different law firm, also taking their cut. And then also represented by my office as the Attorney General of the state of Ohio. Obviously, that's not good for business. It's not good for creating jobs and wealth. Another problem is the complexity. Once we go down this road, and I'm in the middle of it with this opiate litigation, we've got thousands of players out there who all want a seat at the table. It makes the 1990s tobacco litigation, and as complicated and as complex as that was, look like playing checkers. It makes it much more difficult to kind of navigate. And that leads us to another problem, which is the issue of the costs of a meritorious defense. If you're being sued by one or five people that have been wronged in some way, and you've got a meritorious defense, you're going to fight it. You're going to put the money on the table and say, I didn't do anything wrong. If you've got 2,000 people who are all suing you over the same thing, and everybody is looking to get a 20% or 30% cut of the action on a contingency fee, it becomes almost impossible to assert a meritorious defense. And that also is not good for the stability of our system. But that leads to two final and much bigger problems with this sort of litigation. The first is that it's usurping the role of the legislature, the popularly elected policy arm of government that's supposed to be making decisions about things like the environment or handguns or fossil fuels. You name the plaintiff's bar lawsuit of the week. And by putting these into the judiciary, we have all kinds of unintended consequences. People who are interested but not directly involved and not therefore represented in any kind of solution or resolution. And we fundamentally have transferred policy from our elected representatives to the judiciary, which was never designed to handle those kinds of questions. And finally, that leads us to this idea that if it's a good thing, the government can do it. I'm constantly amazed by the number of people that ask me to do a thing that I simply don't have the authority to do as the Attorney General, or that perhaps the government doesn't even have authority to undertake. We need to be a government of laws, a government of constitution, that it has limits to the exercise of the public power. Otherwise, we've just got mob rule. Nobody's property is safe, and nobody's liberty is safe.
Well, you know, General Yost, with COVID-19 and its impact not only on the U.S. economy, but certainly cities and counties and states have really faced some significant revenue shortfalls. And I think that there's a growing concern that some of these municipalities will resort to litigation. So what can a state like Ohio do to help address more rational approaches to litigation, especially when it's designed to achieve legislative or policy goals?
Well, one thing that Ohio did, and we brought this argument late because I took over in the middle of the opioid lawsuit, but I raised the issue of legal doctrine called parens patriae. And it's the idea that when there's a generalized harm, it belongs to the sovereign to bring that in the court of law, not individual entities. As the Supreme Court actually said, this is the United States of America, not the United Cities and Counties of America. So I think that there is the possibility in the future that we will see a situation where we'll have an opportunity to be heard in a timely fashion on that argument, because it's well-founded and I think an appropriate thing for the courts to weigh in on.
Yeah. Well, General Yost, this is definitely an emerging area of concern. You've alluded to the force multiplier effect of having thousands and thousands of potential plaintiffs bringing lawsuits. And of course, you have the private profit interests of plaintiff lawyers that get into this mix. Stay tuned for more efforts by the business community, as well as the Institute for Legal Reform, partnering with very rationally minded enforcement officials like General Yost and his colleagues to try and get some solutions on the table, legislatively or otherwise. And with that, General Yost, let me thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you.
Stephen, it's great seeing you. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year to you. You know, we've had conversations about this in the past. I got to say that I love the state of Louisiana. I love going to New Orleans, going to Jazz Fest, certainly Mardi Gras. The food is terrific. But I'll tell you what, I would not want to be a defendant in the state, just given its legal climate. And so if you could talk to us a little bit about why Louisiana has consistently ranked at the bottom of the barrel in terms of its perception by the business community, where it comes to the fairness of juries, judges, the laws on your books, that would be a good way to start out this discussion. So welcome, and please, floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Harold. And I will tell you, I look forward to welcoming you here once again for Mardi Gras and festivals and ball games as soon as we get that going again, once the world allows that to happen. But we look forward to hosting you here for a fun time soon. But unfortunately, you're right. You know, reputation is reality here in Louisiana. We have a reputation for a poor legal climate. And I wish I could say it was undeserved, but it's not. It's because over the years, we've allowed a legal climate to grow and fester here that has chased away jobs and investment, and it has risen costs for consumer goods for people all across this state. And it's a frustration. You know, we in Louisiana, the stats, you know, don't really lie. We perennially are on the bottom of the hellhole index that you all put out. We file 3 times as many lawsuits as the state of Alabama. We have more lawyers per capita than most other states in the South. And so we don't fare well in those rankings. And that reputation has creeped out across the country. So when businesses look to invest here, whether they are multinational corporations or smaller mom and pops, you know, they have to think twice about that. And so we here at Lobby, we're trying our best to address those concerns and get ahead of that and try to move up those reputational rankings, you know, through some hard work, some effort, and actually going in and repairing some of those laws. Because in our mindset, you know, once you start changing the laws, you can start changing behavior. And we think once that behavior changes, then we can get to a more fair legal climate, and which will, you know, help us grow jobs and investments here in Louisiana.
You know, what I found interesting about the state of Louisiana, Stephen, is the fact that it has one of the country's highest car insurance rates. And you talk about the impact on Louisiana families and businesses in terms of an excessive litigation system. Can you tell us a little bit about what the legislature did in 2020 with a Democratic governor with traditional ties to the plaintiffs' bar to address some of these issues that have been raised over the course of the past several years?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of the things I'm most proud of being affiliated with throughout my career. Louisiana has the second highest car insurance rates in the country. We're just behind Michigan. And the reason why is pretty simple. There has traditionally been a system here of jackpot justice, which drives those rates up. And the reason why is traditionally in Louisiana, it's very easy for an attorney to file an aggressive lawsuit on a fender bender, get in front of the judge of their choosing, keep the jury out of the courtroom, keep certain parts of evidence out of that courtroom. And what it does is it creates kind of a hostage note environment where an insurance company is forced to settle at a very high rate. And what that does is it ends up going into the underlying rates that we all pay, and it drives up rates across the state. You know, Louisiana, we're not the only state that has texting and driving. We're not the only state that has bumpy roads. Every state has that, but our rates have been too high for too long. And so I'm really proud that we worked with the legislature last year to fix that. And we're excited to see what's going to happen. We took that jury trial threshold and we moved it down from 50,000 to 10,000.
Right.
It was the highest in the country, very hard to get a jury. We moved it down to 10,000. Now it's much easier. We lifted some of those gag orders. Now you can talk about the fact that a seatbelt wasn't being worn. We've lifted that gag order. We put some of that more evidence into the courtroom. We've made it easier. And additionally, we've put some caps on the amount that judges can award in addition on top of medical bills paid. So if someone gets hurt and they have a damage and they have to pay bills, that's one thing. But the excessive awards on top of that, we've put a cap on that. So more evidence in the courtrooms, more ability for a jury, more limits on a judge being able to go above and beyond medical bills paid. We think that will lead to a fair environment, And we think it'll lead to a lower cost environment, which will increase competition and drive down rates for Louisianans, big and small, all across the state.
Well, and it also would be something helpful to note that in addition to addressing car insurance related rates and the litigation surrounding that, your legislature last year also passed a suite of COVID-19 related liability reforms, which is one of 32 states now that have done something on this, just given the enormous amount of concern about the wake of litigation that could emerge out of this global pandemic. And so if you could speak a little to that, and then also my question is, how did you get Governor Edwards to agree to this stuff?
Yeah, so well, on the first part of the question, at the time we were in legislative session, obviously the impact of COVID-19, not just the virus itself, but the economic shutdown that ensued in order to battle it, we were in the teeth of it. And so again, we worked with the legislature and we were able to pass a handful of really strong laws to do that. There was an in globo approach by Representative Presley, which basically we're going to provide an in globo liability protection for individuals and businesses and government as they responded to this. And then we also took some unique niche approach where we had a different bill by Senator Hewitt that would have put protection for those that stepped up to produce PPE on a moment's notice because their government was asking them to do that. We also had one by Senator McMath, which said, look, as you're forcing restaurants to go from in-house to serving food to go into to-go containers and changing your drive-through lines and all that, we put liability protections in there because our thought was during that time, business stepped up and said, we want to help, we want to do our part. And so the legislature worked with us to put those liability protections in place, and we're really proud of those bills that came into law. So to the second part of your question, that's a lot of liability reform and tort reform in a legislature that is underneath a governor that you're right, traditionally has not been for tort reform. In fact, he has a trial lawyer experience, and there's no secret that he's not a big fan of many of the things we were trying to do on this front. I think the difference is in the last year, we took a concerted approach and focused effort to bring our message directly to the people of Louisiana. For years, we would talk about liability reform and tort reform in kind of a legalese type of way, why a courtroom had to change. And this time we said, look, we want people to understand this impacts your insurance rates. This impacts your ability for a small business to stay open, to hire people, to invest in your community. And we showed them how it works. And we went to Facebook and social media, and I did more rubber chicken speeches across the state than I could even shake a stick at. We brought that message to the people. And what happened was it resonated. It didn't feel like a wonky legalese argument. They got it. And people at the kitchen table level understood why this was important. And they made their voices heard. They showed up at the Capitol. They went to Facebook. They sent text. They made phone calls. They pulled their legislator, in the Walmart or the local store in their local community, said, hey, look, that car insurance bill, I need your support on that. We heard it. We felt it all across the Capitol. And so I think throughout the process, we were hearing from legislators. They were excited to take these tort reform votes. Usually they're scared of it. They were saying, man, when can we bring the bill up? We're ready to show our constituents we're going to stand strong. The entire time through that process, Governor Edwards has said, look, don't like the bill. You're wasting your time. I'm not going to sign this. But we had a hunch. We had a hunch that the same constituents that were talking to legislators were all also talking to him and letting his constituents and his office know.
And you were right.
We just felt like if it got to his desk, there was going to be too much public support for him to look his people in the eye and say, sorry, not on my watch. And so he looked him in the eye instead and said, I'll bite my tongue and sign it. And that's okay. We appreciate him doing that. He doesn't have to love the bills. He put his signature on the paper. We appreciate him doing it. And we're confident that in the years to come, we think it'll set a precedence that the people of this state saw that Capitol stand up and do the right thing. They saw them stand up to help lower rates on the insurance side. And we think they'll be hungry again whenever the next time comes and we need more change.
Well, look, Stephen, we are very appreciative of the partnership. I sleep better at night knowing that you're down in Baton Rouge fighting the good fight. Look forward to continuing that partnership into 2021. And thank you for your time and your comments.
Harold, I appreciate it very much. I appreciate what you all do at a national level. It's a very important service that you all do. And we stand ready to partner with you any way we can. Thanks a lot.
All right, friend. Take care.
Thank you, friend.
Well, I'm pleased to welcome Harold and Tom back to our virtual stage, and we have just a few minutes to take your questions, and so we're going to dive right in. Harold, I want to start with you, picking up on the conversation that you just had with the Attorney General and Stephen. Our questioner asks, is commercial insurance expanding or adapting to cover new liability risks? And I maybe would ask you to tack onto that. Are there some things that insurance just can't cover? Harold?
Well, the first part of the question, and thank you for the question, I think at this moment, insurance companies are looking at the increasing cost of insurance, just given the liabilities that can emerge out of this pandemic, which was never anticipated prior to March of last year. And so that's why the chamber, state and local chambers are pushing for liability protections across the board for exposure claims, product liability, just a number of lines of litigation that we anticipate the plaintiff lawyers to pursue. Now, when it comes to Neil's tack on to the question, and that is what is insurable or what is not, there's a major area of litigation involving business interruption claims. And these are claims that are being brought by businesses to seek coverage for the time that their businesses were in closure. And there is a very significant area of dispute in terms of whether those claims could be covered or not. And I think it boils down to what insurance is all about, and that is, can you cover something like a global pandemic? Somebody has actually analogized the coverage of that type of risk akin to if every car in this country got into a car accident, what would that mean for potentially destabilizing insurance markets? And these issues are being litigated through our courts right now here in the US, but also across the world in Europe as well as in Asia. And so stay tuned for more of these issues to really percolate up when it comes to some of these important coverage disputes.
Yeah, a lot of important costs there that folks don't realize that impact our own pocketbooks when we're paying our bills. So thanks for bringing that to light. Tom, I want to go to you next. We heard a lot about the importance of people speaking to their elected representatives today. All four of our state chamber leaders mentioned that. Our questioner asks, how much of a role can grassroots play in the chamber's policy initiatives? Do you have a viewpoint on that? And what's the role of small business?
Oh, geez, do I have a view on that? First of all, thank you to the millions of small businesses that continue to push their members of Congress to pass the most recent stimulus bill, which all three of us know provided a significant source of financial assistance to the businesses that need it most. We need that type of activism. We need that type of grassroots contact between the individual small business owners and the members of Congress. I would ask, and I know that I'm pretty much preaching to the choir for those folks who are here on this webinar, when you thank a member of Congress for doing the right thing to help the business community, or when you push a member of Congress to do the right thing for the small business community, just CC or send a copy of that to your local Chamber of Commerce, because we as an advocacy organization do better going into the halls of Congress, going into the halls of the White House, armed with the narratives, the stories, and the grassroots strength of individual small businesses from all across the country.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to take the last question here. Our questioner asks, what national and state policies should we focus on regarding increasing equity in entrepreneurship and economic mobility for workers, especially essential workers? You know, I thought our friend John Harmon did a great job talking about some of these equity issues. And he happened to mention an initiative we've launched at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce called our Quality of Opportunity Initiative. And to the questioner's point, we believe that there are a lot of policies at the federal level, the state level, the local level, and in the private sector to increase equality of opportunity and to bridge the racial gaps that we see in existence in our nation today. In fact, we released a report, some 36 separate policy priorities, really focused around education, access to capital for entrepreneurs, job training, investment, how to reform the criminal justice system. And I would encourage everyone listening who's interested to go to uschamber.com or go to Google and put in U.S. Chamber Equality of Opportunity and look at some of those policies that we can implement at the federal level and the state level and in our own operations to close the inequality gap. I apologize we don't have more time for your questions today. I want to give a special thanks to Harold and Tom for helping me host this today's Power Hour. It has been an honor for the entire U.S. Chamber team to bring to you this series on the state of American business. We are grateful for the time that you have spent with us, and we look forward to working with all of you throughout 2021. Never hesitate to let us know if we can be of assistance. Thank you, good day, and Happy New Year.